recording. Um, yeah. All right, cool. So, Josie, David, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you guys on. I know I almost feel like Andrew Drummond should be here, but I feel like he's here in spirit for igniting the imagination and the competition in the whites. So obviously we're chatting with you guys because you guys won this competition, which for anyone who doesn't know, ooh, I got a light flickering. For anyone who doesn't know, Andrew Drummond, owner of the White Mountain Ski Co. slash Run the Whites, put out a challenge of about a month time frame and said whoever can race the ascent record on Tuckerman Ravine the fastest gets pretty cool gift cards to the shop, and it was like the top 10 uh, get some cash at the shop. So you guys came in first and both set the men's and women's FKTs respectively for the Ascent record, and then Josie also got the round trip women's record too, which I thought was pretty cool, and we'll talk about that. But I guess first of all, just yeah, I want to introduce you guys. Josie, want to just like tell a little bit about how you came uh upon the challenge and then like how you decided to go for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think like most of us in New England, we are all follow Andrew and what they do over in Jackson at White Mountain Ski Co. and Run the Whites just for many years now. And saw them post that on Instagram and had some friends actually go for it a couple days or a couple weeks before. Like one of our good friends is Chris Lebowski, who actually set the fastest time the day before the competition started and then again went out again and it was very sad to get 1 hour with 0 0 seconds, which is definitely frustrating. And then his wife, Jen Downing, is another good friend of ours. And so saw them both go do it and then thought that might be fun. And we happened to be up, we have a cabin, my husband and I, in the White Mountains. And so we spend a lot of time adventuring up there. We're over on the Franconia side. So the west side of Washington, but we found a weekend where it worked. And I will say, I have a 1 year old, and so and a new job, and so trying to triangulate time to go adventure is harder these days. But luckily, my husband was able to watch Teddy, and we had a wedding in the afternoon, and found the exact right day, and the weather was actually amazing. So really lucked out that that day happened to work with a weather window on Washington, which does not happen very often.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
definitely. And then David, yeah, similar to you, like what made you decide to go after it? When did you hear about the challenge? All of that good stuff.
Yeah, I think I just ran into it in a similar fashion. People were talking about it. I follow Andrew on social media. So moving back at the beginning of the summer to the east, I love getting up into the White Mountains and have had some aspirations to, go after some of those like really iconic FKT routes in the Whites. But hadn't been ready to do any of those. And yeah, when I saw it, I just made a priority. It's just far enough from Southern Vermont that it's, not like a every weekend kind of thing to get up there. But when I saw the competition, it motivated me to go run up there as a good hard effort and see what I could throw down.
Yeah, and you went blazing fast. Both of you, really, really fast. Do you feel like this challenge was like in line with your strengths going in? Like, is a single mountain push like your bread and butter?
David,
Either
go
of you. Let's
ahead.
go. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I
David
mean,
first. Yeah.
I like doing a little bit of everything. I've never done any of these like super long, like the long trail or anything like that. But anything from the, single push to up to mountain 50K seem to be my favorite events. And um it fit really well. And I was training for the time for like the Canadian Mountain Running Championships the next weekend. So I thought a 1 hour-ish type just uphill was the kind of thing that's a good fitness test to give me
Yeah.
confidence going into some racing the next week. And so, yeah, we've been lucking out with the weather here, and I found a good day to go up there and had never done the actual Tuckerman's Trail before. So I was running it kind of blind. I just knew that it was steep, and I've been to the top of Washington enough times that I could like kind of tell. And it came down to the wire. It wasn't until the last, 5 minutes that I thought I might actually have a shot to get under an hour and, you know, get on the leaderboard.
That's really cool. Josie, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I think these days, shorter and hard with a lot of vert is what I can squeeze in, particularly like longer things I used to do more of. And now, like the 6 hour, adventure days are much fewer and far between. If I can't remember the last time I did one of those, like probably pre-pregnancy 2 years ago, unfortunately. And so these days, I think the mountains, particularly around here, I feel like it's really nice in New England. You can get a good number of like really hard effort. And I think the technical part is also something that definitely sets this route apart. And just running in the whites in general is so technical. And so, having spent a lot of time in the whites, I think, you have similar to David, I hadn't done the TRT before. I had skied up into the bowl
Mm.
before though and had hiked the lower part, I think, many years ago, but really didn't know what it was going to be like with the head wall and the boulder field up high, but sort of had a sense it's going to be rocky, which always is sort of an adventure when you get up there and you're like, oh, it's even rockier than I thought. Didn't know that was possible.
Yeah, definitely. And so, sort of a follow-up there that I was curious about is, right, you're navigating having a small child and a new job, and you like moved relatively recently. Obviously, like an hour and 10-minute ascent and then an hour and 58-minute round trip is incredibly fast. What has your training looked like, and how like I just like it's just very impressive to me that you're able to run that fast with all these other things going on in your life, and like, how have you managed training with all of that going on?
Well, I feel like Will, you are know this intimately, being in a medical training as well. That I feel like actually, I've been doing this now for, I was in training for, almost a decade basically, and I just recently, a year plus ago, graduated from residency, and so really learned during those times to be very efficient with training. You just have to squeeze it in at like very odd times. So, for
Mhm.
example, I used to run commutes to work, like it was 5 miles each way, and that was sometimes the only way I was going to get exercise. And even when I didn't run, I would bike. So at least I would get like some amount of activity every day. And these days, I think with a kid, it's sort of similar, that you just sort of during nap time, you're like, okay, great, now I have an hour or whatever, and you try to maximize that time. I also have to say, like, the indoor bike trainer is my friend these days. Like, 5 in the morning before work and before the kid is up, particularly if, my husband's gone, then you're like single parenting and you got the monitor on, and that's what you pull off. And that you just have to figure out how to balance that. And I also think, for me, variety is really important. Like, I spend a lot of time both running and biking, and then winter skimo has become my main sport.
Mm.
And so trying not to do too much of one thing has been really helpful for me in terms of both mentally and then also physically. I find if I spend too much time running, I have a hard time. Like, I don't have the time to do a lot of the injury prevention that I should
Sure.
do and know I should do. And so that's sort of one of the ways I try to balance that.
Yeah, for sure. I got into ski touring a couple of years ago, and I just found that like before then I used to sort of run year round and get injured all the time. And I've just found like taking 3 months of taking 3 months to run a lot less and just ski tour has really helped, I feel like, not wear my body out quite as much. So it's I totally agree with you that cross training seems to be a really helpful way of sort of like managing long term.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so
David, what did your
yeah.
training look like going in?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a different, phase of life than Josie here, but I'm actually for the first time moving east, I'm not working right now. So I've had the luxury to have a lot more time to train. And so it's been a little bit more of a battle of balancing, like, how much my body can actually handle now that I have more time for
Hmm.
training. And probably the first time I've been trying to spend more time, really doing the injury prevention, doing the mobility kind of stuff. But also, I'm a huge believer in, having a variety and cross training and doing whatever, keeps you motivated, makes you want to get out of the door for, mental reasons. The training grind can be a little bit real. So doing these fun like mountain type things like go run an FKT, you know, that kind of stuff, and a big amount of like cross training. So I do some roller skiing, I do a lot of mountain biking, road biking. all that stuff. And yeah, it was a just kind of fit in as a coming off a little break, getting back into racing for this fall. That was one of my first like really hard efforts, and it was a good. I'd been like kind of tired and feeling I was out of shape for like the month or so before doing this, and it was a huge boost in confidence to go under
Nice.
power on that huge climb. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I feel like coming out of a time where you feel like you're not fit and then running a 58-minute ascent on Mount Washington is pretty impressive.
Yeah, that'll help.
It's always a good reminder that if you've been doing this like endurance stuff for many years, like fitness doesn't just disappear. If you have to take a couple of weeks off because you're tired, actually you'll end up having a better effort often
For
off
sure.
all less training.
And
And
to sort
yeah, I
oh, go
was
ahead.
just gonna add that, with getting back to these kind of like East Coast trails, some of the long trail stuff and the whites, especially like coming from California and doing a lot of West Coast running, the technicality and the rockiness has just been a whole nother level. So it's been fun to
Hmm.
kind of slowly every week I go out on like another technical challenge, start to feel like I'm getting a little more comfortable running them again. I still am kind of in awe and like of Chris and was it Travis Muhonen and Josie, the people that were able to go up and then race back down. I was totally gassed at the top and like oh, I'll try to go like a little fast for the first 5 minutes and came like a few inches from basically like taking out my ankle, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna walk it the rest of the way down. So I'd be curious to hear what Josie had to say about like did you pace the uphill? What was your approach to get the round trip FKT?
Yeah, no, I did not pace the uphill. I was going, I was flatlining the whole way, in terms of I just basically was like, what's interesting, I actually think about the trail that I don't think I really realized till as we both had not done it before, is the bottom half is much more you're limited by your like cardiovascular and like respiratory system and just like how well you can run uphill. Right. And
Yeah,
then the top half is totally technical, right? Like I felt like my heart rate was actually sort of a little bit lower in the top half because you're sort of limited by just how rocky it is. And it was more about like how my quads were doing in terms of like the big steps with the boulder field and the head wall. I don't know if you had a similar
yeah,
experience,
I,
David.
I 100% agreed. I just thought it got steeper and steeper, and it was like, well, everyone told me that it was more technical the further you went up, so I just kind of hit it pretty much as hard as I could from the beginning, and I was definitely slowing down, but it got way more technical and just became like leg strength limited, kind of
Yeah.
taking big steps, trying to find the line through the boulders near the top.
Yeah, exactly. And that was sort of I expected more to be just like fatigued by how long I'd been going and not so much like my and cardiovascularly fatigued at that point. It was more about just like my legs were like, yeah, this is as fast as we can go at this point. And also, it's also hard when you haven't done it and you're sort of, I'm not exactly sure how much longer it looks, looks can be deceiving. You think you're relatively close and you still have a
Yeah.
little ways to go up there. So that
Exactly.
was hard.
It's hard because it gets steeper and steeper, so you can't actually like see the summit until right as you're
Yeah.
cresting. And
I,
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
I,
with the technical and the steepness, it feels like everyone kind of feels like they're just dying and their legs are giving out. So I was surprised that I was moving better than I felt that I was
mhm.
moving near the top.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think for the what's interesting, I think about the women's times is I actually think that the men have gone much harder on the descents than the women have in terms of like if you just look comparing sort of how long it's taken, right? I think and I think part of that was, on my descent, I on the top it was really wet the day I was there. I think it had rained like a day and a half before and was still really high, like really wet up high. And so the top I had to be pretty slow if I didn't want to take a digger, which I did not want to do. And then the bottom I was really hauling when I got, below the cabin, just trying to catch up time because I felt like I think my first mile down was like 30 minutes. Maybe it was not, maybe it was 25. It was something like way longer than it should have been. I think under much more, that's where I think the round trip time is more variable based on conditions in terms of the like wetness of the rocks matters a lot more going down than up.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you like, what's going through your mind in that first mile of descending, right? Because like you just hit a goal, and I can imagine like at the end, you're like, I'm really close. I can just like haul to the finish. But sort of in that, I guess in that third quarter, the first part of the descent, like what are you thinking about? Especially because you have to be like so focused on where you're putting your feet.
Yeah, I mean that I was sort of trying to recover a little bit too, right? So I was both trying not to fall, trying to keep like a decent pace. And I knew based on sort of the round trip time that I had like a little bit of wiggle room
Mhm.
because I'd gone up like a minute and a half faster, so not a ton of wiggle room. But then knew like lower down sort of what you could pull off in terms of pace. And so really was trying to use that first mile as a little bit of a way to get back in, a little bit of breath and let my legs recover a little bit, though there isn't much recovery that's happening there.
Yeah, do you think it's advantageous to sort of use it as recovery, like get the heart rate down, just focus on the feet? Or do you think that like somebody could like really slam that descent? Or do you think that if you took that strategy, you just fall and like break your ankle?
I think it'd be hard to really slam that. You could definitely go when it's dry, you could definitely take that a
Sure.
good amount
Yeah.
faster. But I also was not wearing the right shoes for being up there. I had shoes that did not have a ton of traction, which was they were great on the way up, but then on the way down, I felt like I was slipping a lot more than I was used to. Like after the after the attempt, I went to, run the whites and got a different pair of shoes for my run the next day up high because I was like, those are not gonna last. I can't do that. And so I think that also, like, I could just tell if I was taking any of those rocks, I was slipping. And
Mhm.
so I was already close to falling. So needed to sort of hold back a little bit there in terms of speed.
Really interesting. So one other thing I was wondering about with both of you is like Tuckerman Ravine Trail is a very popular trail in the Whites. Did you guys have to deal with crowds at all? And how did how did you manage the tourist train if you had to, if you had to deal with it? And do you think you lost time because of it? Maybe David, I'd throw it to
I can
you.
go first. I think I went on a Friday and it was like absolutely gorgeous weather. It had been, I think, dry essentially all week. So you can't ask for much better conditions. And it was cold enough that there were probably like 15 or 20 people I saw on the way up. So it didn't slow me down
Mhm.
at all. They were, I had a couple cheers, a couple like double takes, like, whoa, that guy's going really fast, which always makes you feel good. And the always the funniest thing about it, topping out in Mount Washington is just that you're getting there and it was a super popular day for people coming up the auto road. So as I think I got on the road instead of going up the stairs because there were so many tourists just like walking up that set of stairs near the top.
Mhm.
And then I got to like the little summit pile and there was a line of about like 25 to 40 people just waiting to get their photo op on the actual
Mhm.
top with the sign. And I just kind of came cruising through, like hopping over some boulders and like cut the line and tagged the summit and then like collapsed for 30 seconds.
That's awesome. How about you, Josie?
That's awesome, David. I went on a Saturday morning and I think it was the last weekend in September, so it was really busy.
Mm.
But I think I started early enough that it wasn't too bad up high, which was really important. So there were a lot of people on the lower half up to Hermit Lake Shelter, and that was sort of there was a couple groups where they were hiking all the way across, where you sort of have to, yell a little bit ahead of time, and they sometimes hear you. I don't think it made a huge difference in time at that point. What was nice actually is because there were probably five other folks who were running it. While I was going up, they were coming down. So I even saw Andrew actually
Oh, cool.
on right by the Hermit Lake shelter as I was coming down, and that was nice to get sort of a cheer. And then I saw another kind of like three guys coming down up the off the top, probably on the head wall in the boulder field. And that didn't make a ton of difference, but on my way down, it was absolutely packed. And I was just hucking, hauling past people on the lower part of the trail, and I think they were sort of confused,
Yeah.
which is understandable. But I had one guy who was very sweet, and he had seen me right at the bottom when I'd started running up. He was still going up, wasn't to Hermit Lake Shelter yet when I came back down, and he, said to his friend, "Oh my gosh, we saw her at the bottom. She's gone all the way up and back now." And so it's always nice to get those nice cheers from folks.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was when I came up with the crowds question, I was specifically thinking of you on your descent having to
Okay.
like on the Tux head wall trying to like maneuver around people on this little cliff. But it sounds like you might have been a little bit ahead of those crowds.
A little bit. There were, I think most people didn't make it all the way. Like a lot of folks were just stopping in the bowl or at the
Hmm.
shelter. But there were some folks, but it wasn't too bad in that stretch.
Sure. That's cool.
Um, okay, so I feel like we have to talk about how both people who ran the fastest went in blind. Like I'm like incredibly impressed by that. Like were you worried at all about it? Like I don't know. It's like the Tuckerman Ravine Trail has like a insane reputation, and you guys just ripped it without scouting. So one, congrats. Two, can you tell me what you thought about like in preparation? David first.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously it would be helpful to know, I think, especially with these kind of all out up efforts, if you have, some experience with the technical running, I think it's not so important to have seen it. There could even be an argument made that maybe you're better off not knowing what's coming from a mental thing. So you can dig a little deeper and then just keep pushing. Like you don't know how bad it's gonna be, 5 more minutes up the trail. But yeah, there are a few optimizations. Like I think I got confused for about 5 or 10 seconds about where the trail was going. I like downloaded a GPX of it just to make sure because I didn't wasn't familiar with the exact route. And I think, specific practice would make, you know, a few seconds here and there about knowing your line through the rocks and just kind of knowing what to expect. But on the downhill, absolutely some practice on that terrain would probably be the way to, get, that's a pretty stout FKT now, I think, for the up down, and you're gonna really need to rally the down. There's probably more time to be had on the down, I think, for both these FKTs at this point than on the up.
I think there's something to that. Like you don't know how bad it's going to be, so you just hammer from the jump.
Yeah,
I like that.
I've done quite a few of these just like kind of shortish, up to like 2 3 hour kind of like round trip FKTs. Often I'll just go for the up one and then like depending on the day and how technical and how I'm feeling, I'll decide if I want to like keep sending it on the way down and go for a round trip or not. But it's the downhill is like the one that if it's technical, you really need to know. But I've seemed to have,
Right.
decent success going in blind to a few of these.
Sure.
Yeah.
Josie.
Yeah, I think there is something to that of, you don't know and you can just sort of go for it. But I do think I similarly got lost for a second, probably 15 seconds or so up high. I went straight instead of the right up the boulder field and and realized pretty quickly and had to go back. And then I think it would, otherwise I think similarly the downhill definitely would make more of a difference. I also think if I were, had more time to really dedicate training to this, I think sort of more quad strengthening for both the like top half and for the descent really would that because that's really what I felt was limiting me, particularly up high, would make a difference. And then I think like that's something that I didn't, having gone up Washington via the Prezi before, it's not quite like that. Like the Boulder Field is really those huge steps and the head walls like that. So it's much more like Mount Madison, actually, in fact. Um, like the top of Madison,
Mm.
it feels like that. And
Yeah.
knowing that can sort of be helpful. And then the other big thing would be I would wear different shoes because that would have made a difference on the descent. And good to know now. And don't know whether I'm ready to think about, the pain level of doing it again anytime soon, but maybe someday.
Well, so what shoes were you wearing, and what shoes would you wear if you
Yeah,
were to
I
do it again?
am. Yeah, great question. So I w was wearing some Nike Trails. I just recently gotten them, was really enjoying the cushion on them and felt like that might be helpful on super rocky stuff going up, I really liked having that cushion. I used to run in Solomon speed crosses, which have really good traction, and I'm used to that when I'm running up high in the whites, and that's probably um, what I would have used just because that's what I'm so used to. And then the shoes I got from Andrew's shop were the Hoka Mafates, which are pretty good. They're sort of in between the two. They don't quite have the traction that I'm used to with the speed crosses, so I'm still sort of getting used to them. But probably if going back, I would have worn my Solomons just because I'm so used to it on the descent, I think would have made a big difference.
Right. Yeah. David, what did you wear?
I can't remember the exact make. I wore something that was a La Sportiva, just shoe I'd been running. And actually, I was coming back from I lost my big toenail like a month before, and was just picked the shoe I had that was the most protective, and that was part of why I was being a little cautious on the way down. But I think yeah, definitely like practicing in the right shoes. And for me, I was just going something that had traction and was light enough to not slow you down on the way up. If you're weighing like cushioning a little bit and mostly just traction, I think for coming down
Hmm.
would be my recommendations. It's been yeah, definitely depending on the technicality and the steepness and the length of the effort. You got to think about the pros and cons of um what shoe you wear. Do you want cushioning? Do you want just, as light as possible? Do you want, whatever it is for the effort? So definitely some room to improve, I think, some of these FKTs just by thinking about the specific footwear needs.
Sure.
Definitely. Um, so one other thing I had a question about was, so you're both, maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. My perception of you guys is that neither of you are sort of primarily FKT athletes. It's like you both have set really impressive FKTs. Like David, you've beaten Jack's time on Shasta, and um, Josie, like you've done a 7.5 hour presidential picnic. Like that's ridiculous. But like you're also like a ski mower, or David, it seems like you're like racing uphill stuff. So like where do you guys see? Like, I guess what what kind of FKT challenge excites you, and like where do you see FKTs as like where do you see that falling into who you see yourself as an athlete? Maybe Josie, you can start us off here.
Yeah, I certainly don't have the impressive profile David does, but I do think it's a really fun challenge, particularly like the nice thing about FKTs is that you can do it a little bit more on your own schedule, which is really helpful for me right now because, races are a little bit harder to reliably get to, whereas right now sometimes I'll have a random, midweek day where I might be able to do a hard effort. And so that part is attractive about them. And I think, I just recently listened to your episode about the, 25 top routes in New England. And I was like, ooh, that one sounds like fun. So there are a couple that I'm, eyeing now as, ooh, that might be enjoyable to go for. But I definitely, I mean, I don't, it's funny. These days I think like I'm still, going, the last year or 2 years basically has been very different for me, having been, pregnant and then having a child last year. So my sort of, athletic efforts have sort of been um, I've had to be much more flexible and, will and patient, I would say, with myself. So it's been a very interesting experience of sort of what I feel up for. And it was really
Mhm.
hard to predict what that was going to look like, even on a week to week basis. Um, and as someone in medicine too, it's been fascinating to sort of go through the experience of something that we sort of talk about and think about. And then now that's really changed some of what I'm able to do athletically, or what I have time for athletically, or what I really want to do athletically too, right? Like I used to travel a lot for skimo races. We would go out west. We would go, we traveled internationally. And my ability to do that these days with a 1 year old, and my desire to do that in terms of balancing like athletic feats versus spending time with family and a job, is very different. So that's all to say it's sort of up in the air and in flux, but I think the nice thing is thinking a little bit about other FKTs that might be fun to do and more doable. Maybe not, a long trail, for example, but maybe some of the shorter stuff.
Sure. How about you, David?
Yeah, I really enjoy going after FKTs, but I also like racing. And at this point, I think like my main goals have been mostly focused on like going after the big races that motivate me. And I kind of see most of the FKTs that I've gone after so far have been like, oh, this would be really good, like motivating, fun, different style like training that I, kind of structure as like, okay, like I could go do like some super hard interval workout, or I could go, run a mountain and see if I can get close to the FKT. And that's more motivating for me and fun. And there's a lot of cool history often. And a lot of these routes are in places that, you know, they're not going to host a race just for logistics and permitting reasons. So, yeah, a lot of like the coolest adventures I've had and some of like the really fun efforts have been these FKTs, but they've all mostly been in kind of support of, just building fitness, building confidence, going towards the races that are the main goal at this point. That said, especially as the FKT scene gets, more popular and there's more like, athletes going after them, there's a lot of routes now that you really need to like, pick a whole summer or year and just like learn the course, figure out, how to pace it,
Sure.
the gear to use, and wait for the right weather. And I think, maybe more and more athletes are going to go after some of these like really cool FKTs, like the Prezi Traverse is going to take a lot of work for anyone to better at this point.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and so that you both sort of alluded to there being like um well, I guess Josie more alluded to it, but being other like efforts that are interesting or like these FKTs are getting more and more competitive. What are Josie, what are some of the routes if you are willing to share that have piqued your interest and might call you in the future?
Yeah, I think the one I'm eyeing most is Moosilauke. It's a mountain
Mm,
that's like the closest White Mountain to where I grew up in the Upper Valley and spent, so much time hiking that mountain. And I've heard there is no, I'm waiting to hear from you. You said you were going to put the segment together to find out what the FKT is. Um,
I
if you
know
have a
that
sense and
Yeah, I know that Dan Kurtz has the overall, and it's like 34 minutes and change, which is stupid. I don't know what the women's time is. I theoretically I have the contacts to figure this out. Like Jordan Fields is very connected with the Nordic skiing team, and he can like I'm sure he can get me whatever like 200-year-old leather book that they keep these records in the Rauner library. But I I need to talk to him about that.
Yeah, I think last I knew there's the ski team and Jordan has more of the history than I would know about. But like the Dartmouth ski team had been running Moosilauke from the Ravine Lodge for many, many years. It was a
totally.
once a year thing that we do
Mhm.
every October. I think they just did it like 2 weeks ago. So there's like 40 plus years of history of times and the different iterations as the trail has actually like
Yeah,
changed a little
Right.
bit over time. But
yeah,
yeah, it's a really cool one. I would like to go back and do it again.
Yeah, that was the other
yeah.
thing. Didn't Jordan feel I want to say that Jordan had the record before the trail changed, and then the trail changed, and then Dan set a new record, but it's on the new trail. I don't again need to put together the history, but now that I know that someone of your caliber is seriously considering it, I'll get on the horse to try to figure that out.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, so I've hiked it many times and I've run it a handful of times and the my fastest time is currently when I was 28 weeks pregnant. So I feel like I can improve on that. So at least I'll bring down my own time, hopefully.
Sure.
Yeah, little room to grow. Nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the other one that I've thought about doing for a long time is the Franconia Ridge Loop. That's like
Mm,
right near our cabin. So it feels like the local loop and I have to, give it an effort one of these days, but I don't know when that'll be.
cool. Yeah, that would be
That'd be
sick.
great. Yeah.
Uh, There are like a surprising number of really cool sort of I don't know Franconia Loop isn't a single mountain FKT, but like those really short mountain FKTs. Moose Lock is like sneakily probably the most competitive single mountain in the Northeast. Like it's so competitive. But yeah, that's super cool. David, how about you? Are there any FKTs that pique your interest right now?
I'm not going to commit to going for anything, but I would love to. I've only run the full like Prezi Traverse once, and it was more of a hike. I think
Mhm.
we just did it for fun, and I was like a little bit in awe of how fast those times are because I was, beat up just from hiking it in like 8 or 9 hours. But that would be a big commitment. I think just getting under 4 hours would take some specific training. So getting down to that like 3.5 range is just a little insane. I would need to really, really get in good uphill fitness and like work on my technical downhill running because the speed on the descent is, I think, something that would be quite hard for me. So that's a really cool one, the Prezi Traverse. I did run once the Great Traverse in the Adirondacks, which and I might even go on the record and say that that is more technical than just about anything in the whites. Um,
Ooh.
and yeah, it's a really cool route. So I would love to go for that one sometime.
Yeah, we've heard that about the Great Range a couple times. We need to send more ambassadors over there to check it out.
No, the whites and the whites and the Dax don't mix. We uh we can't talk about
I don't know.
them.
As a Vermonter, they're like kind of I grew up with them being like equidistant. So
Yeah, yeah, totally. No,
I
I
would
just get it.
occasionally go running the whites and occasionally go running their Adirondacks, and they're both rugged, taller mountains where you can actually get up above tree line, where like anything in Vermont is like, okay, maybe like the last 100 feet of a summit might be above tree line, but
I was
you
gonna
don't have
say don't
like
don't
iconic
disparage
traverses
Mansfield.
where you can be above. I love Mansfield. Campbell's Hump might be my favorite mountain, but yeah, the those efforts in the Whites and the Adirondacks where you actually can stay above tree line for a few miles are pretty spectacular.
Totally. That's cool. Um another so right, Mount Washington has a lot of efforts on it in terms of like being raced, but unlike sort of other FKT routes in the Northeast, I don't think we've really figured out yet what sort of the premier race effort is on Mount Washington. And so I was wondering if you guys have any thoughts on this. Like I would assume that Andrew Drummond feels like the thing that people should race is I mean, we can race everything, but like in terms of what's the most competitive record on Mount Washington, I would assume that he would say it should be the Tuckerman Ravine Ascent, considering that's what he put his money on. But like what do you guys think? Like what do you think is the most compelling route on Washington? What do you think people should race the hardest? There are five on the FKT board right now, and yeah, I just don't think one has poked above the other yet. But the influence of athletes like you who are setting the records might sway people one way or the other. Do you want to
Yeah, the influence of champions.
exactly, David? Do you want to start us out?
Yeah, I don't think I've spent quite enough time up there to feel like I should be the one deciding what the effort is that they're all cool. I think people should go after, what motivates them. I think you'd have to ask someone who knows a little bit more about the history of the routes. I think clearly probably the auto road is the most competitive.
Fair.
It's true.
I think anyone that can run under an hour on the auto road could probably go well under an hour on the ravine trail there. But
That's fair. They're very different efforts, though.
they're just different. Yeah, they're all
Yeah,
they're all good in their own way.
totally.
They're a
Ha-
little bit different technically, but
Yeah.
Slightly. How about you, Josie? Do you have any? That's a fair point that, you haven't spent a lot of time on the trail, so maybe it's not exactly a fair question from me, but what do you think, Josie?
I similar to David, I don't feel like I have strong feelings, except to say that I think the Prezi Traverse is probably the premier way to really set a record that
Sure.
includes Washington. That feels like to me the most real one. But I think this goes to what you guys talked about in your recent podcast, which is it would be really helpful to just sort of decide as a community which is the, premier route up something. And how it's very interesting that it's almost self-policed in some ways and decided, right? So about a variety of these things. Like my husband, for example, he actually has the winter FKT on Washington, which is pretty fun. And it wasn't clear exactly like where it started, and he sort
Hmm.
of had to decide where that was, and that was a contentious decision at the time. And I think that those sorts of things would be nice if we could just sort of make a decision and then stick with it. And similar to this, I mean, both the Lions Head Trail and TRT are really cool routes up. But if people really want to race it, it feels like we should all be like, okay, we're going to race this trail.
It's an ever evolving tapestry, really.
It is.
Yeah,
Uh, well, because you think of Moose Lock, for example, like did anyone ever decide? Did anyone ever sit down and decide that like Gorge Brook is the most competitive, or did it just sort of evolve that way over the course of years? And um, it's interesting to the debate of like, do we decide? Do we just let it evolve by itself? I think there are merits to both.
totally, totally. Well, Gorge Brook is just the best way at Moose Lock, though.
Right, of course. Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm trying to think if there's any other things that I had. But I might be running out of things. I don't know, Xander, what else?
um, total simplification, but people versus people, or people racing mountains. Which ones do you guys like? Josie first.
Um, when you say people racing mountains, what do you mean?
Yeah, you didn't set that up very well, man.
Oh, sorry. Well, it's supposed to be like a, first impression type thing. No, like this is like the racing versus like FKT question, I guess, all over again. But like some people really, really find like being next to another person in a race, like to get like the most competitive juices out of them. I think other people like sort of get into that flow state, like with an FKT, like they get really in tune with how they're doing, and that's like how they get the best out of themselves.
Yeah. I'm a people racing mountains person then. I think I really enjoy sort of just seeing how hard I can push myself. And I mean, well, my husband would beg to differ about this. I am very competitive, so I should. I'm not pretending I'm not, and I am motivated when I'm racing other people. But I do think that it's sometimes just really fun to go out there and just be like, how hard can I go? And I find that part, I really enjoyable. I think my mom was sort of appalled at the thought that I enjoyed, that level of suffering of where you're pushing yourself that hard. But it's cool to see what your body's capable of. And I think that's ultimately what gets me out there.
Cool. David?
Yeah, again, I think it's hard to choose. I enjoy the community aspect and the competitiveness. I'm really competitive, so I think, you know, all things being equal, I'd rather do these efforts in a race head to head, and I think that would bring out even better efforts. Um, but there's, some of these iconic routes in places that we can't race are just so cool, and there's something to be said for like a different kind of toughness to go. To go just you versus the mountain where you don't have that external motivation of, someone 50 feet up the trail or breathing down your neck. So I enjoy them both. I think they're slightly different skills, and um, you know, whatever motivates you is what you should go for.
Do you guys think there's a market for head-to-head FKTs? So like this has been attempted a couple times before. Like people have raced head-to-head on the Arizona Trail, I think a couple years ago. I don't think either of them like got a record. Or for example, Alyssa Godesky raced someone whose name I'm forgetting, I apologize, head-to-head on the Adirondack 46 when she set the that record. Um, like I think it would be sick if like David Sinclair versus Dan Kurtz racing up Mount Washington. Like that would be I would live stream that. That would be sick. I don't know. What do you I feel like that could like sort of bridge the gap between racing the mountains, but also having that person near you pushing you hard. Is that something you guys would be interested in seeing more of in the community?
Yeah, I think if you're looking for a, bringing attention to it and getting people to pay attention, that could be a really cool way to go and might make for some interesting content and get people, motivated and capture them. But it's also be a little anticlimactic if you come short of the FKT
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, how about you, Josie?
Yeah, I think that sounds really cool. I mean, even if you do come short of the FKT, and you won, you still get to claim that you won that race. So there's like sort of a consolation prize. But it does seem if you could arrange that and it was possible, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of what the Nordic ski team does on Moose Lock, for example, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely.
but
Yeah.
that's a yeah, and they do it individual start, so like a kind of
Oh,
classic like one racer every 30 seconds. So you get a
Oh,
little bit of
interesting.
that head to head where you might be being passed or passing people out there, but you're not actually. It's really you against the mountain kind of thing. Just
Sure.
maybe the best of both worlds because you get the community vibe of being out there with other people doing it together, but you're not, necessarily racing head to head. It's more about you know, you going for your personal best and just, seeing what you can do.
So you
yeah,
raced
I
it.
mean,
Oh, sorry, go ahead,
oh,
Josie.
oh, I was just gonna say, I think one part that makes racing these a little hard sometimes is how technical they are in the whites, at least, right?
Hmm.
Like being able to see where your feet are going for me matters a lot. Being behind someone in a lot of those in some of that terrain would really be challenging.
Yeah, that's also a fair
Yeah.
point.
I mean, to second that, I think there was maybe a wise choice on Andrew's part to make the challenge only the up, just because when you get into the head thing on the technical downhill train, it's just you're you're asking for some really bad maybe media coverage when someone breaks a leg going head to head because they're a little too competitive. At least when you're with the up down kind of things on technical terrain, it's I think for my own safety, sometimes it's better not to be going head to head against someone. It's always something I have in the back of my mind that like you're out there having fun, but at the end of the day, you do need to do it safely.
That's super fair. Yeah, there would probably be carnage if he had put it as a round trip, a round trip record.
At,
Uh,
at the least, there would have been a few totally blown ankles. Yeah.
right. I wonder. Yeah. Oh gosh. That just for I know this is completely sidetracking, but that made me think of the round trip ski record, and that just seems like asinine to me. It seems
Talking it
like
off the head wall.
yeah, it's the
Yeah, I
I
mean, you guys know about like Tony Matt, who set the downhill record on Washington in the like 30s, right?
no.
Oh, there's a guy who the downhill record on Washington. I'm gonna butcher the amount of time that it was, but I want to say it was, basically half the amount of time that the current descent is. So I want to say it's like something like 5 or 10 minutes, 10 minutes maybe, something insane for the level of gear they were on almost 100 years ago. And no one can get even close to that descent now, and everyone is sort of just shocked that someone was able to do it, and it's a real record. I mean, there was more snow back then, so that probably helped.
Hmm.
But it's sort of this incredible feat if you think about those basically like they were on the equivalent of like Nordic skis back then.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's insane. But that would be a pretty cool effort to go after the round trip,
That's
Washington.
bananas. I wonder if there was enough, there must have been enough snow to just ski straight through, Because I feel like nowadays
100%.
I've I've never seen tucks filled in enough where you can just ski all the way to the hut. Like there's that little trail.
You
Maybe it fills
you
in.
go to the right of the like waterfall area, coming down to the
Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah.
So Looker's left. Um, I don't know. We'd have to ask my husband, but he was able to ski, I'm pretty sure, the whole way down. Otherwise,
Oh,
there's no
okay.
way he, booted any part of it.
Sure.
Yeah, it'd be
But it's
really cool
very
to
conditions
gather
dependent.
to
Yeah.
gather a little bit more of the history of the ski records on Washington and get some people to go for it. I've also never skied tucks, but with getting more into skimo, it's definitely something I want to get out there and do this spring. Is not set a speed record on the way down, but to definitely go ski it sometime soon.
Sure. God, that seems
Totally.
so risky. It just seems like ACL central.
Well, if you're going up first, the downhill time's not quite. You can afford to lose 30 or 40 seconds on the way down.
That's fair, I suppose. Yeah. Uh, man, that's really cool. Okay, so anything you guys feel like we're missing about these efforts of yours?
No, I think that's about about all I got. I don't have much more to add. It was a really fun challenge. It was cool to see how many people actually got out there and did it. That's like, that's kind of the point of the thing is that we got a bunch of people out there to enjoy the mountains this fall, and it was cool. There were probably like 6 or 7 people that ran it the same morning I did.
Yeah, really cool.
I was high-fiving people that were pushing their way up while I was coming back down.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, more of these kind of community oriented, like we're all going to go after this one FKT, this fall, and it doesn't have to be a specific day, but like I think it was fun. Like I wouldn't have done it without Andrew putting it out there and making it a challenge, and like regardless of the $300 gift card, I would have done it anyways if there wasn't money behind it, or right.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was very
yeah.
satisfying to watch because so many people were out there. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say I agree. I feel like it's a testament to Andrew's sort of convening power and the community of the sort of a small but mighty community in New England. It was really fun to see so many people, from all over the New England states make their way to Mount Washington over the course of the month. It was really fun to sort of follow along and see what was happening every day, and people were going for it all the time, and it was just a cool thing to watch. And I agree, like the money, I didn't notice that they had said how much money there was going to be, and I had a dream that it was a $15 gift certificate, which I thought was hilarious. And I was like, of course Andrew would successfully get us all out there for $15, right? And it totally would have been worth it if that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And like yeah, it worked in terms of getting the times down. Like I was like watching the board throughout the month to be like, man, maybe if the records aren't, or if the times aren't that good by the end, like maybe I'll try to sneak something in and get like eighth place or something. And then very quickly it became like, oh no, I can't get even close to these times. Like I think on both the men's and the women's side, more than half of the top 10 fastest times now are in the last like 2 months, which is very cool.
Yeah, you better watch out. I might put a $100 gift certificate out for the long trail.
Damn it.
How many people are motivated for that?
That'd be sick.
$100 for that many miles might not be worth it.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're running like 30 cents a mile. That'd be sick. Um, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to chat with us. It was a pleasure meeting you both, and congrats on the records.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was,
thank
uh, it
you.
was, it was great to hear from you guys.
Nice to meet you all, and yeah, hear a little more about this New England FKT scene. There's lots of cool stuff going on.
Cool. All right.